What's up, everybody? I'm here in Istanbul, Turkey, and I can't see the strikes, the action that is not too far away from me right now in Iran and Lebanon, and of course the occupied land known as Israel. But we do have to talk about this because it was really easy to see this coming from miles away. In fact, I predicted it just 3 days ago exactly how this was all going to unfold on a live stream here in Turkey, the strikes on Beirut, and that this would cause the subsequent and almost immediate unraveling of a peace deal, which really is not a peace deal. It just means that, Iran and Israel have not had direct firefights, major firefights, for a substantial period of time. So first of all, take a listen to this clip from 3 days ago. Okay, you want to hear my prediction right now? What's going to happen? Israel's going to bomb the shit out of Beirut, and then everything's just going to fall apart right after that.
They're going to really do damage to Beirut?
No, I think it'll be like a couple days, and then it'll just all collapse.
Beirut?
No, bro, the peace.
What peace?
Whatever sort of peace there's been no.
Oh, with Iran.
Yes. And just within 48 hours, that's exactly what happened. We had the bombing of Beirut in a very big way for the first time since this quote-unquote ceasefire, which is not really a ceasefire, went into effect. The IDF carried out major airstrikes on Al-Dahia, which is the southern part of Beirut, a beautiful part of the city, but also where, it's a predominantly Shia area, lots of supporters of the Lebanese resistance, and presumably a lot of members of the Lebanese resistance either live or work. They carried out large-scale strikes there under the guise of targeting Lebanese resistance infrastructure and command posts. But obviously that ended up not being true, like with so many of these other so-called targeted strikes that Israel carries out. The strikes did, according to Israel, symbolically target an already evacuated area that was at one point in the distant past, I guess, maybe possibly controlled by the Lebanese resistance. But they didn't take any Hezbollah soldiers out in the process or command out in the process. They did, in fact, unalive 2 Lebanese civilians. They injured 11 Lebanese civilians. And this was the red line for Iran. They had previously come out very recently saying that, hey, look, if you guys strike Beirut, it's going to require a response, and you're not going to like that response. And I'll say, to start off here, that I think that the response Iran gave was very tempered. It was very mild, given the fact that you had strikes on Beirut, right? The most important capital city, Lebanon's capital city, right? You'd think that if Beirut were targeted, Iran would target Tel Aviv. You'd think that if some of the, more southern cities or the smaller cities in Lebanon are targeted, then Iran would target Haifa. And if some rural village in the south of Lebanon is targeted, then Iran might target some of the northern, less occupied regions of the Zionist entity. But we didn't see strikes on Tel Aviv, actually. So I would have to say that Iran's response was, you could call it measured. I'd say too measured. If you want to actually stop this cycle of violence, then the enemy must, I think, truly understand that they are going to be dealt more than a bloody nose if they continue to carry out depraved acts like these, like what we saw in Beirut. Now, Israel claimed in the initial moments after the strike on Beirut that they did inform the United States, they informed the Trump administration. Trump had come out after the fact, after, these strikes on Israel were carried out, saying, oh, we knew nothing of this, we were not involved. And obviously that's a lie. Israel needs the United States to carry out any sort of operation on Iran. That's for certain. And they did carry out these operations on Iran after the Iranian strikes on Israel. But we want to get into exactly what happened over the last 24 hours. So let's get into it. Late last night, local time in Iran, we had some very curious warning signs. We had flights to Iran, which were making immediate U-turns out of nowhere. I was sitting down having dinner, and I started to get these notifications coming in one after another, all these flights that were making U-turns and canceling their route toward Iran. At 10:30 p.m. local time in Tehran, Iran launched their first wave of attacks on Israel. Here are some of the scenes from the first wave of strikes launched from Iran. They were met, the missiles were met on the ground by a bunch of very joyful Iranians who were out rallying like they do each and every night during the duration of this conflict, even during the cold period of this conflict, you could call it. So take a look at this video. Now, Iran launched a total of 5 different waves of attacks last night. They went into the early morning hours, and most of the attacks actually were focused on targeting the more northern settlements, northern areas, cities of Israel, which are sparsely populated right now due to the simple fact that the Lebanese resistance has done a real number on the Israeli occupying forces in that region. A lot of those cities, a lot of those rural areas are evacuated. Missiles were launched by Iran from Tabriz, from Kermanshah, from Isfahan, from Qam, from Karaj, Kashan, Urmia. Iran's missile bases, and this was kind of the message of the 5 different attack waves last night. Iran's missile bases are fully operational. Doesn't matter where they're launching from. All of these places that have been bombed 30, 40, 50 times, 60 times by the United States and Israel throughout the duration of the Ramadan war are all now operational. So that's the real message that I think should be taken away from this. Iran also did shoot down an Israeli drone. They shot down a U.S. drone over Iraq, an Israeli Hermes 900 drone over Iran. What were those drones doing? Were they participating in some sort of a strike? No, these were surveillance drones that were trying to monitor from where Iran was actually firing these missiles from. And I guess it was kind of a useless mission because regardless of where they were flying these drones from, they were going to see some missiles being launched in all likelihood because Iran was launching missiles from all of their missile facilities. Okay. Now, several visual impacts were confirmed. Last night, at least 3 visual impacts were confirmed. But Israel does have a really tight stranglehold on any sort of video of these sorts of strikes being made out into the public. Of course, if you film and publish these sorts of videos in Israel, like in so many of the other countries which have been targets in the recent wars, you will be imprisoned and possibly worse, and in some of these countries like Bahrain, if memory serves correct, you could face a life sentence, a death sentence. Okay, so there were not too many videos of these impacts, but what we did get was confirmation that actually IDF bases were targeted in the north. And you're not going to see any videos of those. Even, it's not just because there are no good Samaritans around that are trying to document this stuff. It's also because these IDF bases are located in very rural, like the most desolate places in the entire country. And there's just no one there to film. So there were strikes on these bases. We don't know, how much damage that they've done. At least not yet, but maybe in the future we will. Israel initially came out and said that they will reply, but they won't immediately reply to the Iranian strikes. Then Channel 12 came out and said there will be no response to these Iranian strikes. Trump, he said, no, Israel's not going to respond. He said Israel won't have any choice to accept the Iran deal. They can't respond. I call the shots. Netanyahu doesn't call the shots. And then, like clockwork, Trump is humiliated. 4:20 a.m. explosions from Israeli missiles in Tehran, in Karaj, Tabriz, and Isfahan. Iran's Mehrabad airport which was already evacuated earlier in the day. That was another one of the worrying signs, red flags that we saw early in the day, was also struck. No Israeli jets entered Iranian airspace. 15 different sites in Iran were targeted, one of which was a sheep farm, so I'm praying for the sheeps of Iran as well. Also, a lot of military infrastructure was hit. So there, I'm not going to go through all the details, but it was like a drone manufacturing site was hit. Some other military sites were hit. So, you saw Israel do something that it claimed effectively it couldn't do. This is what we always saw in Gaza. This is what we saw even in the Ramadan war. It's, when they want to actually do a targeted strike, they always magically can do it. But then when they massacre hundreds of schoolgirls or they massacre an entire refugee camp in Gaza, they say, well, actually, no, we can't do targeted strikes and this is just collateral damage and we're sorry. And, we don't have pinpoint accuracy. So they actually did carry out some targeted strikes last night. They didn't level an entire elementary school filled with children or something like that. They do have the capability to do these sorts of targeted strikes. Most of the locations that were targeted by Israel in these strikes, these 15 sites, had already been targeted multiple times by the U.S. and Israel during the Ramadan war. So these were, can't call them symbolic for Israel, but how effective they were, big question mark there. Probably not too effective, okay? Then fast forward to 6 a.m., we had a missile attack, not from Iran, not from Israel, but launched from Yemen towards the Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia. Now, there's no real confirmation of whether that was successful or not. Saudi Arabia did claim that, the missile was launched and then it landed somewhere. We don't really know where it landed. They put out a statement a few minutes ago, I read. There were 2 explosions reported. This was heard in the vicinity of the Prince Sultan Air Base, so I'm not too certain. I believe the Saudi Arabian government's official statement that we've lost track of the missile. We don't know where it went. Then, Yemen's Ansar Allah launched a missile at 6:30 a.m. local time, Iran, toward Israel. And that was targeting some military brigades, some barracks that the IDF holds. It did not hit its target as far as I understand. But maybe one of them did. Who knows? They launched multiple missiles. They just published a video of the missiles being launched. It's pretty incredible, the technology that they are showcasing. At 7:30 a.m. local time in Iran, we saw missile attacks from Iran toward Israel again. This was in response to the 15 targets that were hit earlier in the morning. Large strikes targeted some settler regions near Jerusalem in Itamar, and we do have photos of that. Some substantial damage was done there. And then, over the next 5 hours, Iran launched 3 more waves of missiles toward Israel. The IDF also carried out another wave of strikes in Iran. In addition to these exchanges, enemy drones were shot down by the Iranian air defenses. And the situation has, for the most part, calmed down since then, okay? In the morning attacks that Iran launched, like late morning, 8, 9 a.m., a lot of heavy expenditures of Israeli interceptor missiles. It looked exactly like the first days of the Ramadan war or during the 12-day war, where the sky was just littered with these interceptor missile smoke trails. And, we didn't see a lot of that toward the end of the Ramadan war because they are running out of these interceptor missiles. So it seems as though they are just flying through these interceptors yet again. After these morning attacks, Yemen's Ansar Allah announced the closure of the Bab el-Mandeb Strait in the Red Sea, total closure to any Zionist ships in the Red Sea. So they will have to cope with that once more. Again, this is not a closure of the Red Sea to entrance, exit for Saudi ships, which would be a major escalation and a major problem for Saudi Arabia. That is still a card that is left up the sleeve of the Yemeni Houthis, okay? But that was a big deal that they announced the closure of the Red Sea. We saw some joint attacks. So we saw joint attacks throughout the duration of this. During some of the Iranian attacks, the initial Iranian attacks, there was joint Lebanese resistance, drones being launched. And some of those 3 different waves I mentioned during the early morning hours that Iran launched, there were some joint Yemeni operations with drones, not with missiles like the other ones I mentioned to you. And that's pretty much it as far as the attacks went. 11:30, we saw more explosions in Isfahan and Tehran, 3 waves of different attacks. Israeli army radio came out and said the conflict will last for several days. They also notified Israeli war journalists the same. This will last for several days. Hospitals have relocated in sensitive areas to underground operations. Schools, education across Israel have been canceled for the time being. Flights have been canceled to Tel Aviv for at least another 24 hours. That's what I last saw here. And really, the main issue now is that Iran put out a statement saying, hey, look, from now on, if anywhere in Lebanon is targeted, we are going to respond. This kind of gets back to what I was saying at the start of the video, that it needs to be an eye for an eye, I think, right? I'm not saying this is not what I want, but you'd think it'd be an eye for an eye if they want this to come to a close. If Beirut is targeted, then presumably Tel Aviv would be targeted. If a smaller city, if Tyre was targeted, then maybe Haifa is targeted. If a rural area is targeted, then northern settlements, these sparsely populated areas would be targeted. So what we saw in the afternoon hours were major attacks on the south of Lebanon. Iran had put out a statement previously, several hours before these attacks began, saying, if anywhere is targeted in all of Lebanon, we will respond. And that, in their statement, included the south. They said as much. They said, even if southern Lebanon is targeted, from now on, if the Zionist regime continues its aggression against us or against southern Lebanon or elsewhere in Lebanon, we will strike and punish them severely. That was from Iran's Khatam al-Anbiya central headquarters. And what have we seen since then? Israeli airstrikes on southern Lebanon. We have seen a response by the Lebanese resistance in Kiryat Shmona, which is in the north, presumably a drone strike. Then we saw large-scale destruction, like crazy airstrikes on Karayeb in southern Lebanon. That was from an Israeli airstrike. What else did we see here? I don't know if there were any other major attacks on Lebanon. We saw U.S. CENTCOM announce that the U.S. Navy disabled an Iranian-affiliated vessel in the Sea of Oman earlier today. An F-18 fired a missile into the engine room of the MT Meravex, stopping it in its path. And since then, it's been relatively quiet. Israeli attacks in southern Lebanon still continue. So more attacks in southern Lebanon. And there's been no response from Iran thus far. So I'm guessing that tonight we'll probably see another wave of attacks if Iran keeps their word. If they don't keep their word, then, well, I don't know what to make of it. It's a broken promise. It's a broken promise. And it wouldn't be the first time we see a broken promise involving Lebanon, right? Remember, fingers on the trigger, we're ready. And Lebanon continued to be bombed and bombed and bombed and bombed, and nothing happened until Beirut was touched, Dahia to be specific. Well, now they were very clear. They said, even if southern Lebanon is touched, we will respond. So tonight will be the determining factor, really, truly. So whether or not Iran is serious about keeping their word. Are these just speeches? Is this just rhetoric? We're keeping our trigger on the finger, or will they respond? Well, in the coming hours, probably 2-3 hours, we will have an answer. But what is certain is it looks like this is headed exactly in the direction that I predicted just 3 days ago when I said Beirut would be targeted, and subsequent to that, all hell would break loose. I'm hoping that doesn't happen, but it looks like exactly where we are headed. Needless to say, Iran is at the strongest point it has ever been. It is stronger than ever before. The Lebanese resistance has been displaying exceptional technological capabilities in their resistance against the invading Zionist troops. And Israel is looking very weak right now. Not as weak as Trump, who was humiliated within about 30 minutes of him saying that Israel would not strike Iran. But they're all looking pretty weak right now. Regardless, we will continue to follow all of this. I'm going to be doing more videos, and I've got a special surprise for all of you coming very, very soon. Stay on the lookout.